Welcome, everyone, to what promises to be a fascinating exploration into the Beatles, their music, and their enduring impact. It's hard to overstate their significance in music history.
Right, Hal. And to fully appreciate their impact, we must understand the cultural and historical context of the 60s. They didn't just create music in a vacuum, they reflected and influenced the world around them.
Of course, let's not forget the leap in technological innovations during their time. The Beatles were at the forefront, experimenting with multi-track recording, among other things, which fundamentally changed the way music was produced.
Speaking of changes, their iconic status in rock music has set a benchmark. They evolved from a boy band to the most influential group in rock history. That's a transformation worth dissecting. Absolutely, and their influence went beyond music. They were a part of larger cultural movements, challenging norms and dabbling in various forms of activism. It's crucial we dissect how much of that was them and how much was the era they were in.
That's a fair point, Jazz. However, the technical and creative innovations they introduced in music production can't be undersold. They've left a legacy that artists today are still trying to emulate or build upon.
True, Mick. Their exploration into uncharted musical territory without losing their mass appeal is unparalleled. But let's dive deeper into these points and see where our discussions take us. There's much to unpack here, from songwriting to cultural impact.
Hal, I think their status is unassailable, but shouldn't we also critically assess their contributions? It's easy to romanticize their legacy without acknowledging where they might have fallen short.
Izzy makes a good point, but let's not undervalue the context of their rise. The Beatles' music was a reflection of its time, yet they managed to transcend those boundaries and speak to universal themes.
True, but let's be careful not to attribute every innovation to the Beatles alone. The 60s were ripe with technological advancements that any artist of that time could have taken advantage of.
That's a slippery slope, Lenny. While technology played a role, it was their vision that truly made the difference. It's about how they used those tools, not just that they had access to them.
Jazz, while vision is important, you can't overlook the genius in their production techniques. It wasn't just about having the latest gadget, it was about pushing those gadgets to the limits of creativity.
Everyone, I think this sets the stage perfectly for our discussion. There's clearly a lot to admire about the Beatles, but also room for critical scrutiny. Let's keep this energy as we move forward. Let's dive into the evolution of the songwriting partnership between Lennon and McCartney. What's fascinating is how their relationship mirrored the progression of the Beatles' music. Thoughts?
To start, it's clear that Lennon and McCartney's early compositions set a new standard for pop music. Their ability to craft narratives within songs was revolutionary at the time.
Absolutely, Amelia. But it wasn't just about narratives. Their musical chemistry was palpable. Songs like A Hard Day's Night and Help showcase that synergy.
While I don't disagree on their synergy, I think the pedestal we put their songwriting partnership on can sometimes overshadow the technical evolution they went through. McCartney's melodic bass playing and Lennon's rhythm guitar work also deserve a spotlight.
And you can't talk about their songwriting without acknowledging McCartney's melodic genius and Lennon's lyrical sharpness. It's like they were two halves of a whole, yet completely distinct.
But isn't that narrative a bit too romanticized? Their collaborative genius is undeniable, but focusing solely on Lennon and McCartney does a disservice to Harrison and Starr's contributions, not to mention George Martin's influence.
Jazz, that's a valid point. However, the Lennon-McCartney partnership was the core engine driving the Beatles. Their ability to blend contrasting elements, Lennon's cynicism with McCartney's optimism, created timeless music.
Honestly, as much as their early work was groundbreaking, I think their later songs, where they worked more independently, show remarkable growth. Eleanor Rigby and Strawberry Fields Forever come to mind.
That independence did lead to some of their most brilliant work, Lenny. But let's not underplay how even their independent work was often inspired or challenged by their desire to outdo each other.
True, but let's also talk influence. Modern artists continuously cite Lennon and McCartney as inspirations. Their songwriting partnership created a blueprint that still resonates today.
Influence, sure, but let's not get carried away. The musical landscape has drastically changed. While they laid foundations, many artists have taken those lessons and evolved in directions Lennon and McCartney could never have imagined.
Interesting points all around. It's clear that Lennon and McCartney's partnership, with all its complexities, was a driving force in not just the Beatles' music, but also in shaping the future of pop and rock. Their competition, collaboration, and evolution indeed speak volumes. Let's keep this energy as we transition to our next segment. Let's delve into George Martin's role. Many regard him as the fifth Beatle for his profound influence. Mick, you have some strong opinions about his contributions.
Absolutely, Hal. Martin wasn't just another producer. His innovative studio techniques literally shaped the sound of the Beatles. Without his classical background, songs like Yesterday or Eleanor Rigby wouldn't have their iconic string arrangements.
I must jump in here. While I respect Martin's contributions, attributing the band's success to him overshadows the raw talent of the Beatles. Their songwriting and musical ingenuity was the primary catalyst for their success, not just Martin's production.
Lenny has a point, but it's hard to ignore how Martin's classical influence elevated the band's music. His ability to translate the Beatles' avant-garde ideas into music was unparalleled. They were lucky to have him.
True, Amelia. Consider Tomorrow Never Knows. Martin and the Beatles were experimenting in ways no one else was at the time. His technical knowledge allowed the band's creativity to flourish. It was a symbiotic relationship. Symbiotic, yes, but let's not romanticize it. Martin played a crucial role, but creativity is not owned by the producer alone. The Beatles would have evolved sound-wise with or without Martin. Innovation wasn't exclusive to him.
Jazz, that undervalues Martin's unique input. The Beatles had raw talent, but Martin's sophistication in the studio was transformative. His influence on the music was as vital as Lennon's or McCartney's was.
And let's not forget, it was Martin's decision to pair studio experimentations with rock and roll. He was instrumental in creating the psychedelic sound of Sgt. Pepper's. That's not just facilitation, that's co-creation.
Co-creation is a stretch. Remember, the Beatles were already experimenting with tape loops and unconventional instruments before Martin fully embraced those ideas. He facilitated, yes, but it was their vision.
But Lenny, without Martin's expertise and willingness, that vision might not have been realized as profoundly. He pioneered multi-track recording for them. That's not just facilitation, it's fundamental to their revolutionary sound.
All right, but the question remains, do we give too much credit to Martin at the expense of other influences on the Beatles' sound? I think we might. They were absorbing and experimenting with a vast array of musical influences.
It's clear we all respect Martin's contribution, though we differ on the extent. His pioneering spirit, combined with the Beatles' boundless creativity, resulted in some of the most memorable music of the 20th century. Let's remember, it was a collaboration that changed music forever. Let's dive into the Beatles' early foray into what we now recognize as music videos. They were pioneers, paving the way for future artists and even influencing platforms like MTV.
Absolutely, Hal. The Beatles' promotional films for songs like Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane were revolutionary, blending musical performance with artistic expression in a way that wasn't just about promoting a single. It was about creating an experience.
I'm not sure I'd call them pioneers, Izzy. They were utilizing a format that was available and popular at the time. It's the content that mattered, and they were brilliant at seizing the moment.
Mick has a point. Calling them pioneers might be overstating it. Artists were experimenting with film and music long before the Beatles. Yes, they used the medium effectively, but it's wrong to credit them with the birth of the music video as we know it.
But you can't deny the cultural impact those videos had, Jazz. They weren't just promotional tools, they were a statement merging pop culture with artistic visual expression. They helped set the stage for what music videos became.
The technical aspects of those videos shouldn't be overlooked either. The edits, the use of color, the surreal imagery. They might not have been the first to do it, but they certainly did it with a style that caught the world's attention.
And that's just it, isn't it? It's not about who did it first, but who did it in a way that left an indelible mark. Their approach inspired countless artists to think of music videos as an extension of their art. Inspiration isn't the same as innovation, though. We credit the Beatles with a lot, but in this area, they were one of many contributors. Let's not make it seem like they were the only ones pushing boundaries.
Boundary pushing or not, you can't ignore the influence. Today's artists still look to those early videos as a benchmark for creativity and expression. That speaks volumes.
The debate here seems to center around innovation versus impact. Regardless of whether or not the Beatles were the first to use the medium in this way, their use of it certainly left a lasting legacy that shaped future generations.
Precisely how. Their work in the medium broke into new audiences and created a new way for fans to connect with music. That's a significant contribution, whether or not it was the first of its kind.
I think the takeaway is that the Beatles, innovators or not, knew how to embrace and enhance the tools at their disposal. They turned music videos into an art form that complemented their music, setting a precedent for those who followed.
Respectfully, while they did contribute, it's important we recognize the wider context of the time. They were part of a wave of artists exploring visual mediums, not solely defining it.
It sounds like, while there's some disagreement on the level of innovation the Beatles brought to music videos, we can all agree their contributions were impactful and influential in the evolution of music and visual art. Let's move on. Let's dive into one of the most celebrated albums in music history, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Critics hail it as revolutionary, but it's time we unpack that. Mick, you've often touted the album's production as groundbreaking. Could you expand on that?
Absolutely, Hal. The production techniques George Martin and the Beatles employed on Sgt. Pepper were light years ahead of their time. We're talking about the use of vari-speed, splicing different takes together, and the sheer audacity of creating a concept album that actually worked as a coherent piece. It wasn't just innovative, it set a template for modern music production.
I must intervene, though. Calling Sgt. Pepper revolutionary overlooks the contributions of other artists around that time who were also pushing boundaries. Yes, the Beatles took it mainstream, but they stood on the shoulders of giants. Are we giving too much credit to the album just because it's the Beatles? Jazz has a point. The album was a watershed moment, no doubt, but the revolutionary tag perhaps oversimplifies the narrative. However, the cultural impact of Sgt. Pepper can't be understated. It was not just about the music, but how it encapsulated the spirit of the 60s, blending art, music, and society in a way that had never been done before.
And let's not forget the historical context. Sgt. Pepper landed at a unique moment in the 60s, resonating with the counterculture of the time. The Beatles cleverly used their platform to blur the lines between popular and high art, making a bold statement that rock music could be as enriching and complex as any other art form.
But was the technical merit of the album truly groundbreaking, or was it the context that amplified its impact? If we dissect the recording techniques objectively, apart from the Beatles' aura, we find precedents in jazz and classical music. The Beatles were brilliant, but they were also beneficiaries of a perfect cultural storm.
While context enhanced its reception, Lenny, underestimating the technical innovation at play here, does a disservice to the album. Multi-tracking alone had profound implications for how music could be produced. It wasn't just about stitching together sounds, it was about expanding the canvas of what music could be.
Expanding the canvas, sure, but at the expense of other innovative artists who are now footnotes in music history. Sgt. Pepper is treated as a monolith, overshadowing other deserving works from that era. Come on, Jazz, you can't deny the album's lasting influence on artists and music genres across the board. It's not merely about who did what first, but how well it was executed and its lasting impact. In that regard, Sgt. Pepper is unparalleled.
And yet, Sgt. Pepper isn't without its critics. Some view it as the Beatles' overindulgence in studio trickery over substance. But this debate itself is a testament to its significance. It's not just an album, it's a cultural artifact that invites ongoing discussion and interpretation.
This has been an enriching debate. It's clear Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is as much a product of its time as it is a timeless piece of art that continues to provoke debate. Whether viewed as groundbreaking or overrated, its legacy in shaping music and culture is undeniable. Let's dive into the Beatles' profound contributions to studio recording techniques and technology. Mick, your extensive experience as a music producer gives you a unique insight here.
Thanks, Hal. The Beatles, with their experimentation in the studio, pushed the boundaries of what could be accomplished with multi-track recording. Tomorrow Never Knows alone was a seismic shift in studio technique, featuring revolutionary looping and tape manipulation. It wasn't just creative, it was pioneering.
And let's not forget the use of varied tape speeds and backwards recordings on songs like Strawberry Fields Forever. They were using the studio as an instrument long before that concept became common. That creativity has certainly influenced countless artists in how they approach the recording process.
While I'm all for giving credit where it's due, I think it's a stretch to attribute all these innovations directly to the Beatles. George Martin and the engineers at Abbey Road Studios played a significant role. The Beatles had the ideas, but it was a team effort to make those ideas a reality.
Lenny does make a fair point. However, it was the Beatles' willingness to experiment and their collaboration with Martin and the engineers that ignited these advances. Their influence on the recording process wasn't just about the technology, it was about fostering a creative collaboration between artists and producers.
I'm going to push back on that. While yes, they did innovate, there were other artists at the time exploring similar techniques. We can't view their contributions in isolation. It's important to acknowledge the cultural and technological ecosystem that enabled those innovations.
But that's exactly why their contributions stand out. Despite others working in similar veins, the Beatles' work reached a global audience, effectively democratizing those techniques. They made the experimental mainstream, which is a significant legacy.
Exactly, Mick. It's about the scale of the influence. Their widespread popularity meant that the techniques they pioneered or popularized became part of the global music vocabulary, inspiring generations of musicians and producers.
I'll concede they popularized these techniques, but we shouldn't overly romanticize their role. Technical limitations of the time also spurred creativity. Necessity is the mother of invention, after all.
True, Lenny, but their foresight to experiment and push for new sounds even when the technology was limiting is precisely why they were innovators. They didn't just work within the confines of what was available, they pushed boundaries and expanded those confines.
It's vital to look at both sides. Their work undoubtedly advanced studio recording techniques, but it was part of a broader zeitgeist of experimentation. The Beatles accelerated changes that were already underway.
It's clear there's a consensus that the Beatles played a significant role in innovating studio recording techniques, even if opinions differ on the extent and context of their impact. Their legacy in shaping how music is produced is undeniable, serving as a foundation for modern recording practices. Let's move on to how these innovations impacted the wider music industry. Let's delve into the Beatles' profound engagement with Indian music and philosophy. It's a topic that often polarizes opinions.
I'd like to start by acknowledging the historical context. In the late 60s, the Beatles, led by George Harrison's deep interest, began exploring Indian music and philosophy. This wasn't just a musical phase. It was a significant reflection of the times, a period of exploring and embracing diverse cultures.
But we must admit, their exploration brought Indian music to Western audiences in a way no one had before. George Harrison's sitar in Norwegian wood was groundbreaking. It opened doors to new sounds, blending cultures in the studio.
Groundbreaking, sure, but let's not gloss over the fact that their engagement was also a form of cultural appropriation. They took elements of Indian culture that appealed to them without necessarily understanding the depth behind it. This approach is quite problematic when viewed through a contemporary lens. Jazz makes a compelling point. But let's not forget, the Beatles' curiosity also fostered genuine appreciation and respect for Indian culture. Harrison was sincere in his spiritual pursuit, which went beyond mere musical experimentation. Their legacy in this domain should be viewed as multifaceted.
Speaking of multifaceted, the technical aspect of incorporating Indian instruments into rock music was revolutionary at that time. The sitar, the tabla, these weren't just exotic flavors. They required a rethink of song structure, rhythm, and harmony.
Revolutionary or not, one could argue the authenticity was somewhat lacking. The Beatles were tourists in Indian music, not true practitioners. Their work sparked interest, but it hardly represented the tradition accurately.
Yet, their influence cannot be understated. They paved the way for the world music genre, encouraging artists to explore beyond their cultural boundaries. The Beatles' flirtation with Indian music opened minds and ears.
True, Amelia. And while we critique their level of authenticity, the fact remains that they introduced a generation to the beauty of Indian music and the richness of its philosophy. That's a significant impact, irrespective of their motivations.
And let's not overlook the lasting legacy of this influence. Artists today still draw upon cross-cultural influences, a practice the Beatles arguably pioneered. Their engagement with Indian music and philosophy, however imperfect, set a precedent for future musical explorations.
This has been a fiery debate. It's clear the Beatles' engagement with Indian culture is a complex topic, layered with questions of authenticity, cultural appropriation, and legacy. As we unpick these layers, we're reminded of the enduring impact of their exploration, both positive and contentious. Welcome back. Our discussion now turns to Yoko Ono and her impact on the Beatles and John Lennon's music. Let's dive in. Izzy, your thoughts?
Well, Yoko's impact is undeniable. Her artistry and connection with Lennon brought a new dimension to his work, deepening the experimental edge the Beatles started exploring. Revolution 9, anyone?
Absolutely, but I think it's simplistic to just paint her as this muse or singular influence. Lennon was already leaning towards the avant-garde. Yoko amplified it, sure, but let's not erase his agency in the partnership.
Amplified? I'd say hijacked. You can't overlook the public and media backlash against her. This idea that she's the reason the Beatles split is oversimplified, but her presence was a catalyst in an already volatile mix.
That's a fair point, Jazz. However, casting Yoko as the villain overlooks the complex dynamics at play. She was part of the 1960s avant-garde scene, pushing boundaries. Lennon's collaboration with her was a melding of minds, not just her influencing him.
Influence aside, let's talk about the actual music here. The experimental work post-Yoko, frankly, wasn't always the Beatles' best. The White Album had its moments, but there's a clear before and after in terms of cohesiveness and quality.
Interesting points all around. Izzy, any counter to Lenny's point on the quality of music?
Definitely. Innovation doesn't always mean immediate accessibility or cohesion. The later work challenged norms and pushed boundaries. That's valuable. Credit is due to both Lennon and Ono for that brave exploration.
Speaking of credit, Yoko's influence on Lennon's solo career is palpable. Imagine is a song that resonates globally, echoing both of their ideals. Their partnership was musically fruitful, beyond the drama.
Fruitful? Maybe. But let's not gloss over the disruption her presence caused. It's part of the story, too. The Beatles were already fragmenting, but her role in their dynamics accelerated things. That's not blaming, it's acknowledging the complexity.
Right, Jazz? And it's important to recognize Yoko's own artistry wasn't just absorbed into Lennon's. She didn't just influence him. They influenced each other. Her art was revolutionary in its own right.
Sure, mutual influence. But at the end of the day, we're left with a Beatles discography that took a sharp turn. Fans are divided on the outcome. Did it enrich their legacy or muddle it?
It's clear Yoko Ono is a figure who sparks as much debate as the music of the Beatles themselves. Her role in their story and Lennon's music is layered and complex, reflecting the multifaceted nature of influence, art, and partnership. Let's wrap up here. Moving on. All right, diving into the solo careers of the Beatles now. There's no question they each found their own path, but who do we think was the most successful, both artistically and commercially?
It's hard to argue against Paul McCartney leading commercially. Wings had some massive hits, and McCartney's solo work has been prolific. But success isn't just about numbers.
I have to echo that. Paul was a juggernaut in terms of sales, wasn't he? However, if we're talking influence, John Lennon's solo work had an immeasurable impact. Imagine Alone.
Financial success and cultural impact are two very different things. George Harrison's All Things Must Pass speaks volumes artistically, perhaps more so than any other single album by a Beatle post-breakup.
George did bring a certain depth, didn't he? But we shouldn't overlook Ringo Starr either. He's often underrated, but his solo career brought a lot of joy to fans.
Joy doesn't equate to artistic success, Amelia. Talent-wise, we're looking at a mixed bag post-Beatles. George was the dark horse who probably showed the most growth. Technically speaking, his work was a revelation.
Lenny, while that's a fair point about George, don't you think McCartney's versatility across genres gives him the edge artistically?
Versatility isn't the same as depth, is he? George delved into things. He wasn't just skimming the surface across genres.
But aren't we forgetting the incredible political and social impact John had? Imagine his protests for peace. The man used his platform in a way that arguably overshadowed his musical output.
Jazz makes an excellent point. John's work swayed public opinion on major issues. That's a rare power that's not easily quantified.
This discussion shows that success is multifaceted, but it's hard to deny that each Beatle carved out a significant solo path that had a massive influence on music and culture beyond just sales figures.
Exactly, Hal. And we should consider the ways they each influenced the next generation. Their collective influence stretches far and wide, impacting not just music, but also fashion, film, and even politics.
Well, as much as we talk about influence, it's important to not get lost in glorification. They each had their stumbles and flaws, post-Beatles. True, but those stumbles didn't overshadow their achievements. It's their humanity that makes their solo careers so relatable and enduring.
Perhaps, but let's not bypass the critique necessary for understanding their complete body of work. McCartney's and Starr's solo projects, while commercially successful, often lacked the artistic depth found in Lennon's and Harrison's.
It sounds like we're agreeing that success can't be boiled down to just numbers or even purely artistic critique. Their legacies are complex, woven through both their music and their lives. We're moving into a deeply fascinating part of the Beatles' story, how they fit into, influenced, and were influenced by the counterculture movement of the 1960s. Izzy, can you kick us off with your perspective on this?
Certainly, Hal. The Beatles were more than musicians. They were cultural icons who mirrored and propelled the sentiments of the 60s counterculture movement. Their lyrics in albums like Sgt. Pepper and songs like Revolution encapsulate the era's spirit of questioning authority and promoting peace.
I'll have to jump in, Izzy. It's crucial to separate the art from the artist to some degree. While the Beatles undeniably became symbols of the movement, it's worth questioning how much of this was a conscious effort to drive social change versus a marketing strategy that capitalized on the zeitgeist.
That's a strong point, Mick. And adding to that, the counterculture movement was vast. It wasn't just about peace and love, but also involved serious political activism, which the Beatles often seemed to engage with in a rather superficial way. Take Revolution. Wasn't it more a critique than an endorsement of radical change? You could see it as critique, jazz, but remember John Lennon's bed-ins for peace with Yoko Ono? That was a tangible, albeit unconventional form of political activism, leveraging their fame for the peace movement.
Indeed, Izzy. And their influence on the movement wasn't solely lyrical or conceptual. The Beatles' very existence and their break from conventional norms challenged society's status quo, inspiring young people to question and rethink their own values and the societal norms imposed on them.
While it's tempting to romanticize their roles, we mustn't overstate their impact. The Beatles were musicians first, activists second, if at all. Their primary contribution to the counterculture was through their music's evolution, experimenting with genres and lyrics that reflected the changing times, rather than directly attempting to shape societal perspectives.
I find all these views compelling, but let's not underestimate the power of music as a form of activism. The mere act of public figures like the Beatles discussing peace, love, and questioning authority had a significant impact on the public consciousness.
Hal, with respect, while their discussions brought topics into the public eye, we must ask ourselves, did it lead to real change, or did it merely comfort a disillusioned generation?
Jazz has hit on something crucial. Real change requires action, not just words or symbolic gestures. However, dismissing the Beatles' impact completely would be a mistake. They brought critical issues to the forefront of global discussion, which in itself is a form of activism.
And let's not forget, their global reach meant that these messages were disseminated worldwide, not just within the confines of the Western counterculture. The Beatles had a knack for making the personal political and the political personal.
Their global reach is indisputable, Amelia, but effectiveness is a whole other debate. Just because we can sing along to give peace a chance doesn't mean we're closer to achieving it.
This debate underscores the complex relationship between artists and activism. The Beatles, whether intentionally or not, became emblems of their time, contributing to the counterculture's narrative. Their legacy in this realm remains as nuanced and debated as their music. Let's ponder on that as we transition to our next segment. Let's dive into the role of Ringo Starr in the Beatles. Often seen just as the drummer, how do we reassess his impact on the band's music and legacy?
Right off the bat, I'll say Ringo was far more than just a drummer. His style was foundational to the Beatles' sound. Remember his beat on Tomorrow Never Knows? Revolutionary.
Innovative, sure, but let's not overstate things. Any skilled drummer could have filled Ringo's shoes. The Beatles were primarily defined by their songwriting and vocal harmonies.
Lenny, I've got to interrupt there. That's undervaluing Starr's unique approach. He wasn't just any drummer. His feel and timing brought life to those songs. Rain, for example, showcases some of his best work. It's not just technique, it's artistry.
Artistry or not, the real question is whether his contributions were significant beyond keeping time. The Beatles' transcendence wasn't solely on the back of Ringo's drumming.
But Jazz, that's underestimating the subtle complexities in his drumming that added layers to their music. Ringo's personality also permeated through his drumming, giving the Beatles an irreplaceable chemistry. It's not all about technical skill, it's about what each member brought to the table.
Exactly, Amelia. And let's not forget, Ringo also contributed vocally to the Beatles. Tracks like Yellow Submarine and With a Little Help from My Friends are iconic because of his charm and character.
Those tracks are memorable, I'll give you that. But they were primarily novelty songs, not the core of the Beatles' artistic achievements.
A bit harsh, Lenny. Those so-called novelty songs helped shape the Beatles' diverse catalog. Ringo's approachability and everyman persona allowed the band to explore different musical territories.
I acknowledge Mick's point. Starr's persona and contributions did indeed play a part in the Beatles' mass appeal. Yet, I remain unconvinced about his technical influence.
Interesting perspectives all around. It seems Ringo's impact may be seen more in the intangible elements he brought to the band's dynamic, beyond just raw drumming skill.
Absolutely, Hal. It's those intangible elements that often differentiate a good band from a legendary one. Starr's contribution to the Beatles' legacy is immeasurable in that sense.
And let's not discount the influence he's had on drummers that followed. Many cite Ringo as a major influence for his musicality, not just his technique.
Fair point, Izzy. My skepticism doesn't take away from how Ringo inspired countless musicians. Influence, after all, is a significant measure of legacy.
Right, and while we argue about his technical prowess or lack thereof, his legacy as a part of the Beatles is undeniable. His impact extends beyond the kit.
Well, when you put it that way, the debate shifts. It's perhaps more about the collective synergy of the Beatles, with Ringo as an essential element of that success.
A spirited discussion, as always. It's clear Ringo Starr's role in the Beatles, and beyond, cannot be pinned down to just one aspect. His contributions, both tangible and intangible, were vital to the band's legendary status. As we approach the end of our discussion, I'd like us to each share a final thought on the Beatles' enduring legacy and influence. Amelia, let's start with you.
Well, through our conversation, it's evident that the Beatles were not just musicians. They were innovators, cultural icons who transcended music itself. Their contribution to music and society remains unparalleled, even if some aspects are debated hotly.
I suppose that's true, Amelia, though we've certainly had our disagreements today, especially on the technical versus the cultural impact. Their technical innovations were significant, but let's not overly romanticize it. Other artists were also pushing boundaries.
Lenny makes a fair point, but let's not downplay the sheer scale of the Beatles' influence. Beyond just sound, they reshaped the very concept of what a band could be and do. Their exploration into different musical genres and recording techniques paved the way for countless artists. And yet the question of cultural appropriation and their role in the counterculture movement begs a critical look. Their influence was immense, but not without its complexities and controversies. It's crucial we acknowledge this rather than glossing over it in favor of a sanitized legacy.
Jazz, I hear you, but I think it's that complexity that makes the Beatles endlessly fascinating and relevant. Their ability to blend different sounds, challenge societal norms, and even the controversies contribute to their lasting legacy. Their influence on music production alone is monumental.
Indeed, this has been a heated but productive conversation. It's clear that the Beatles' contribution to music and culture is multifaceted, inspiring passion and debate. Their legacy is not just in their music, but in how they inspired change, challenged norms, and influenced generations.
Hal, while we've acknowledged their groundbreaking work, we must also recognize how they inspired others to innovate, breaking down barriers for future artists. Their legacy is a living, evolving influence in music.
Absolutely, and their exploration into various musical styles and cultural themes opened doors, albeit not without rightful criticism. Their impact spans beyond music into social and cultural realms, affecting not just musicians, but influencing societal perspectives.
True, though it's important to critique and analyze their impact with a balanced view. Their contributions were significant, but they were part of a larger tapestry of artists pushing boundaries at the time.
Wrestling with their complexities is what keeps the Beatles relevant in discussions today. Their art reflects growth, innovation, and at times controversy. Their legacy, however, does compel us to reflect on cultural impact and appropriation in music history.
As a music producer, I can attest to their enduring influence on the creative process in the studio. They weren't afraid to experiment and push the limits, setting new benchmarks for what could be achieved in music production.
Thank you, everyone, for a robust discussion. It's clear the Beatles' legacy continues to resonate, inspire, and provoke debate. Their impact on music, culture, and even social movements is a testament to their artistry and vision. Thank you to all our contributors for their insights today.